Okay, in this video we're going to be looking at how a shift in the demand curve can influence the equilibrium price and quantity and the steps that we need to take in order to reach a new equilibrium. So in essence the demand curve can shift one of two ways. So in this first graph the demand curve is shifting to the left, and what that demand curve shifting to the left means is now that at any given price there will be less demand for the product. So at a price of P1 the old demand was here, and now the demand is here. So at any price, so at P2, the old demand would have been out here, and now the new demand is here. At any given price, there is now less demand for the product. Or the demand curve, like in this example here, can shift to the right, and this means at any given price, there is now more demand for the product. So the old demand was here at price 1, and now the new demand is out here. And we've discussed the factors that will cause a shift in the demand curve. So, for example, one market worth looking at is the market for bathers approaching summer. Now, obviously, approaching summer, the bathers are going to be more popular. So, if we look at any given price, so at a price of $90, the old demand for bathers was $400, and now it's $600. So, there is now an extra quantity of 200 bathing suits demanded because it's approaching summer. It's still less than the supply, so we're still going to have a surplus, but not as big a surplus as we would have in the past. So the old equilibrium point, equilibrium 1, was at a price of $60. So at demand 1, we had demand at 700 and supply of 700, and this was our new equilibrium point, our old equilibrium point, sorry. But now if we supply at a price of $60 per bathing suit, we're going to have demand of 900. So now we have demand 2. Demand 1 doesn't exist anymore. Supply of 700. So now we're going to have a shortage of 200 units. Okay, so demand has shifted to the right, which means that we now demand more of the product at $60. Supply has stayed the same, so we have a shortage of 200 units. So what's going to happen to get us back into equilibrium? So what's going to happen? These are the steps, and I'm going to flick between the two slides. At the old equilibrium price of $60, there is now a shortage of 200 bathing suits. Demand is 900, supply is 700. So how do we get rid of a shortage? Well, logically speaking, if you have a shortage of a product, you're running out too quickly, you need to raise the price. So we're going to raise the price to get rid of our shortage. So first step, there's a shortage at the old equilibrium price, step 1. Step 2, suppliers increase the price to $70 to decrease the shortage. So flicking back, we can see here that a price of $70, now demand has gone down from 900 to 800, so there's less quantity demanded, or there has been a contraction in demand. And at the higher price of $70, suppliers are more willing to supply, and we know that based on the law of supply. So from this price of $60, there is now less. Once we increase the price to $70, demand contracts to 800, and supply expands to 800. And now we have our new equilibrium. Supply is equal to demand at the new price of $70. If we charged this price back in spring, when demand was only 600, we would have had a surplus of 200 units. So, step 1, there's a shortage at the old equilibrium price. Step 2, suppliers increase the price to $70 to decrease the shortage. It is the price that causes an expansion in supply. Because there's now a higher price on offer, some suppliers are willing to shift their resources into the production of bathing suits because they're motivated by profit. So this leads to an expansion in supply as suppliers seek to increase their profit margins and shift resource into production. But the higher price also leads to a contraction in demand, which causes a decrease in the shortage. You need to use this order to answer these questions. If you say that there's an expansion in supply before a change in price, well, that's not true, because it's the change in price from $60 to $70 that's causing the expansion in supply. And the same with contraction in demand. So the order here of setting it out is really important. And we arrive at a new equilibrium price of $70 here, and an equilibrium quantity of 800 units. So the price has gone from $60 to $70, and the units have gone from, at the old equilibrium, 700 to 800 units. So we arrive at the new equilibrium of $70 and equilibrium quantity of 800 units. These are the steps you need to take. Shortage, we increase the price to $70, there's an expansion in supply, contraction in demand, and we arrive at the new equilibrium price of $70. Summing up briefly, there is a shortage at the old equilibrium price due to the shift in demand, right? Suppliers increase the price to decrease the shortage. This leads to a contraction in demand as well as a expansion in supply, and we arrive at a new equilibrium at a higher price and higher quantity traded. Here's another example showing you the graphs, which hopefully will make it a little bit easier to understand. So in this case, you can see D1 to D2, demand has shifted to the right. The arrow is going to the right. So what happens if we keep charging this price at equilibrium 1 at a price of $3? Well, now demand is all the way out here. Okay, this demand curve D1 does not exist anymore. Okay, this demand curve is non-existent. Okay, that only existed back in spring. It doesn't exist anymore. So demand is out here, but if we keep charging a price of $3, supply stays at this point here, at E1. Okay, supply will not increase unless we increase the price. There hasn't been a shift in supply. So demand is here. Okay, I can't draw a D, but demand is here where my cursor is, and supply is still back here. Okay, so we have a shortage. How do we get rid of a shortage? Well, we increase the price. We increase the price from $3 to $4. Okay, and that causes two things. It causes an expansion in supply, okay, because producers are more willing to supply the product because of the higher price, and a contraction in demand because some people can now no longer afford the product. So a shift in demand actually ends up leading to an expansion in supply. And we reach a new point of a price of $4 and equilibrium quantity of 12,000. And if you do get a question like this, state the value of any shortages. So in this case, if we kept charging a price of $3, we would have a shortage of 800 coffee cups because demand has gone to 1,600, but supply is only at 800. To get rid of the shortage, we increase the price. So stepping it out quickly, there's a shortage at the old equilibrium price of $3 of 800 coffee cups. Suppliers increase the price to $4 to decrease the shortage. This leads to an expansion in supply because of the higher profit margins and a contraction in demand. That gets rid of the shortage, and we arrive at a new equilibrium price of $4 and equilibrium quantity of 12,000 units sold. Both the price and quantity has increased. Okay, what I'm going to get you what you've just done, my apologies, is you've done a question asking you what happens if we shift the equilibrium to the left. So we shift the demand curve to the left. So what would happen? The shift in the demand curve causes a surplus at the old price because we're now demanding less. So suppliers decrease the price to decrease the surplus. The decrease in price leads to a contraction in supply because there's less profits, or suppliers substitute out of the market. And it also leads to an expansion in demand because it's now cheaper. So the actual demand curve is shifted to left, but eventually the lower price then leads to an expansion in demand. This decreases the surplus, and we end up at a new equilibrium at a lower price and lower quantity traded. Okay. I'm going to discuss this in the next video. Thanks for listening.